Hi, welcome. It's so great to see so many of you here tonight. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. I am Katey McPherson, and as Catherine said, I have been part of a junior high or high school for the last 20 years. Until the past 6 months, I've been on the road teaching and training teachers, parents, and administrators about digital citizenship as well as practical strategies for the classroom. My presentation tonight is definitely going to be quick. This subject is heavy, it's full of heart, and it's important not only for you but for your students to understand how to be positive and responsible online while also meandering the very difficult waters of being a teenager in 2016. I'm going to start off with just a visual of the teen brain. Brain research we've been doing for obviously a long time, and Dr. Sabo will probably lend some research of his own to this, but as we look at the teen brain, we're looking at girls and boys and their development. When we look at teen brain, we're looking at girls are developing a little bit faster than our boys. If you see the image here, age 22 is full development of a female brain. Age 30 is full development for a boy brain. So what this means when we're looking at all sorts of things, but we're looking at teen behavior, we're looking at that prefrontal cortex, which is the decision-making capability of our students. That is not developed yet. If you leave here with nothing else, they don't have a prefrontal cortex developed yet. You are their frontal lobe. So when and if you have them making mistakes online, when you ask the question, why did you do that? This is why. They are operating from their amygdala, which is where the emotions arise from. So I assume you have teenagers or tweens that maybe make decisions and you ask, why did you do that? Or they seem very emotional. That prefrontal cortex is what's coming into play. When we look at girls and boys and how they use social media differently, what we talk about, and it's kind of funny, is girls go not hysterical, they go historical. And so the hippocampus is the memory storage of the brain, and female students will be able to recite to you verbatim what happened online, what happened at school, what she was wearing, where she was standing. And if you think back to your middle school and high school career, females in the room, you can probably tell us one of those stories. We also look at, obviously, as I said, the amygdala and that emotion that comes from when they're online, those decisions that they're making. This obviously brings us back to that prefrontal cortex where they're making these decisions and we're looking at some of the things they're posting and we are completely horrified, not only by the language they're using, but also, is this really my kid? And is this something that they're really saying? Because the child that lives in my house doesn't talk like that. But the child that's online has like a completely different avatar. And they're constantly meandering through these different avatars and putting on masks, so to speak, to keep up with that social group. It is normal. It is normal for them to be curious. It is normal for them to want to be part of that social pecking order. What they need from us is guidance and support and listening. A lot of times parents will come to me and say, I cannot believe he did this. I am so embarrassed and I just don't know what's going on with him. This is what's going on with him. He's operating with half a brain. It's not developed yet. That decision making is not working. And so when those emotions come up and they are talking, and we have females with cingulate gyrus, which is that hamster wheel, and the details are going over and over, and you're like, okay, I got it. I've heard the story twice now. So we need to put some healthy boundaries in place. And so tonight, what I've shown you here, this is a brain scan of a typical teen brain. On the upper left, you have the resting state of boy brain. On the lower left, you have the resting state of a female brain. The orange, red, and pink that are flowing there, that is blood flow and neurons firing, obviously. On the right, you have boy brain, active boy brain within a classroom. Lower right, girl brain, active girl brain in the classroom. So you can see online, on social media, the differences in amount of words they're going to use, the type of words they're going to use, and the amount of activity. You will see that girls use social media in a much different way than boys do. Boys like novelty, relevance, and competition. Girls also like that, but they use a ton more words and sometimes more images to kind of prove themselves in that social group. So remember the part about the undeveloped brain, and then we're going to look at some of the apps that are out there as well. Before we go into the apps and video games and things that are out there as mediums and the access they have for them, let's talk a little bit about some of the hormones. So we have an undeveloped brain, we have no frontal lobe, and then we have a bunch of hormones that are just dumping on them constantly. So we're looking at testosterone and oxytocin. This is how kids and females and human beings bond with each other. So if you have a boy and a girl in your house, you kind of have a petri dish experiment of how they're bonding with each other. It is probably typical that you're seeing your female student online using more words and more of that bonding than you are with your boys. Your boys may use it in a very different way on some of the video games. They have the headsets, they're talking to each other, but the medium's a little bit different. And when I get to the apps, I can explain a little bit more. When we're looking at stress hormones like serotonin and cortisol, when cortisol goes up and coats your teen brain, emotions shut down. So in the conversation you're having with them about what just happened online, or what you were just apprised of by the assistant principal, or what came home from school from another parent or student, you need to remember that in that conversation, if we're driving shame-based approaches up to, what did you do, and I can't believe you did this, those emotions are going to shut down. And if you walk away with nothing else tonight, I hope that the message you take is, please listen to them. This is their voice, this is their medium. They have tons more access to tons more things than we did growing up. The world has changed, and we have to step into the virtual world. It is not going away. If anything, it's advancing, as you know. So as we look at these hormones, we also have to take into account the stress that this double agent life puts on them. And so I do have a quick clip from a documentary called #Being13. And I would highly recommend that not only you watch it, but you watch with them. It's very well done. It's by CNN and Anderson Cooper, and it's 45 minutes of 200 to 300 13-year-olds talking about how difficult all of this is to manage. And we know as parents, it's also difficult for us to manage. It is a full-time job, keeping up with all of the things they have access to. So we're looking at brain development, we're looking at the access they have, we're looking at hormones and changing bodies, and we're looking at why are they doing some of the things they're doing online. Some of the needs that they get met online are the needs that are being unmet in our homes and our communities. And so obviously that's a really big topic for another night. But when you're looking at the stuff that they are posting online, remember there's a need there. There's a need for followers and there's a need for likes. They can be a 4.3 student, a student athlete, and still have the need to be wanted in their social group. That card will trump you every time. The app sheet that I put in the folder, those apps will trump good parenting anytime. And so what we need to remember is we want those mistakes that they will make online to happen under this roof and to happen under your roof. Because you can guide and impact the consequences, and you can guide and impact what happens in the future. If they don't have the support at home, they will take it into their own hands, which leads to all sorts of different things, and some things Stephanie will allude to tonight. So I have a very short clip of a boy talking about how hard it is to be part of this digital world and how hard it is to keep up that double agent status. I will tell you that he does use some profanity in his postings, which is not how he speaks to his parents or at school. So it outlines for you those avatars and personas that they feel like they have to put out there in order to keep up with each other.
Everyone. I mean, no one can lie about it. Like, you always talk about something. That's literally what drama is. It's what gossip is, and everyone does it.
Beyond gossip, some of the teens admitted the pressure to fit in, be popular, makes them act like an entirely different person online. saying and doing things they'd never do in the real world.
I've read a lot of your postings. The people you are face to face seems a lot different than the people you seem to be on social media. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, I guess most people would. To me, all my friends know that I'm the same either way.
Yeah, and you think you're the same in real life as you are on social media?
Yes.
Despite what he says, the affable and respectful Jonathan in the real world seems to totally contradict Jonathan in the virtual world.
A couple of posts of yours that some of them are pretty sexually explicit, use a lot of profanity. Somebody else posted a photo that I want to show, and you reposted and made a comment that said, "Let me hit." You posted a photo that's very graphic, but I can't put on television. You said, "Most of these bitches at Rodney Thompson middle, bro, goddamn, you dirty bitch, you dirty bitch, you dirty bitch."
I found that, on Twitter, I found that on there, and I posted it on Instagram.
Yeah. Do you worry about some of the stuff you put out, or?
Yeah, but at one point, I wasn't really using it. People would tell me, you gotta make your Instagram useful or funny. So at one point I was like, okay, I can try. So I took a couple of days to figure out what to do and how to set it up.
Do you worry about that?
Yeah.
Let me get it.
Well, I was just playing around. I don't mess with drugs or whatever.
Because that was one of 7 weed posts. And so, I guess against the earlier question about presenting yourself on social media is different than you are in real life. I'm not picking on Jonathan here, because a lot of you and a lot of the 200 kids we talked to, the way you all talk is very different than the way you talk. Either certainly to adults, but even just listening to you in the green room, the way you talk to each other, it seems like sometimes you adopt a persona. Maybe that's tougher on social media than it is in real life.
It's all every day is just about social media and how people see you. So basically, you can be the most quietest kid in the back of the class, no friends, anything. As soon as you get home, you can go on the computer to Facebook and start doing whatever you want, and then you can have 15K followers,
15,000 followers.
Yeah.
So you can create an identity that's different.
So, as Jonathan alluded, this is a full-time job for them, not only during school hours, before school, at night when you think they're sleeping. So the pressure to fit in has increased. The access they have has increased. The healthy boundaries that we need to put in place need to increase. And so that's my next part for you is I would like you to take out the app handout that I made for you, and I tried to make it as concise as possible, and I wanted to thank the coalition and our ASU student who also put together not only a very concise Excel spreadsheet, but why it should be monitored. So we don't have enough time to go through all of these apps, but what I'd like to point out is how I organize them for you and what I think you should do with them. In the green column, obviously, these are some of the most popular apps for teens. Facebook is still being used, but is kind of faded out. As soon as we got on, they got off. So they still do use it, but just not in the same way and not as often. Instagram, obviously, you're probably well aware of. And so what kids do with Instagram is obviously mostly photos. And the way they manipulate and exploit each other with Instagram is through what we call sins of omission. So if I go to a birthday party, I go to a party, I go to the mall, and I'm with 5 girls, I purposely tag 5 of the 6 girls and leave the 6th girl out. And so they're very purposeful, they can be very hurtful, but they can also use those things for positive branding and marketing themselves. And that's really where our schools and our communities need to move, is if this is where we're staying and this is where we're advancing, how do we teach our students digital citizenship? How do we teach them use this to make yourself look good? Use this as an electronic portfolio to move into the college admissions process. And I truly feel that's where colleges are headed as far as admissions. So not all of these apps are bad, but they do have the capacity to be used in a harassment, intimidating way, especially amongst teens that don't have a developed brain. Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I wrestled with this a little bit. And the way I see those are positive ways kids can promote themselves. Twitter is used 1-line tweets, 2-line tweets. You can only use 45 characters. Can it be used in a poor way? Absolutely. Do they allow nudity? Absolutely. So again, all of these apps, it doesn't matter which one on this page you're looking at, have the capacity to be used in a harmful way. And it goes back to those healthy boundaries as a family. How are you going to set that up? And it is going to take your time to supervise and to manage them. In the middle column, I would call your attention to 2 or 3. Musical.ly is relatively new. It's a music app where kids get on and they post videos, lip syncing, songs. The problem with that is the songs have really inappropriate content. And so as much as I love a little girl singing and dancing, some of those moves can get pretty inappropriate, and some of the lyrics are obviously not appropriate as well. Periscope is a newer app. It's a live streaming app. The issue I have with it is the privacy settings, unless they are on lockdown. They can be coordinated with your GPS. So if I'm a student live streaming from my closet, live streaming from my bedroom, anybody online that I have given access to, so if I have not privatized my account and it is public, anybody, it doesn't matter how old they are, can see where I live and the coordinates to my address to my home. It is very dangerous, especially for our tweens that are really into videoing themselves, for them to have access to Periscope. So I would highly advise getting to know that. It can be used for business. A lot of businesses use it for good, and I've seen marketing go really well with it. But for these tweens and teens that don't understand the capacity of predators, it can be dangerous. Snapchat comes up often. It's probably the most talked about app. Your texts don't go poof. Students that are savvy will also have Snap Save on their devices, and Snap Save saves all your Snapchats. So if you send a nude image or an inappropriate text, it can be captured on Snapchat. So it does not disappear. Police can track the IP address. We've had to do that at the school level several times in bullying situations. So Snapchat, do they love it? Absolutely. Can you make cute faces on it? Yes. Is it fun to use in an appropriate way? Absolutely. But they do use it for inappropriate use, typically for sexting. And so I would highly advise getting to know that one as well. The last column in the red, I don't see any good uses for any of these. The kids would argue with me, but most of them are anonymizers, meaning they're anonymous apps. So the people using them, the other students don't necessarily know who it is that are saying rude things about them. Ask.fm and Kik have turned schools upside down. 95% of my day, probably in the last 3 years, has been spent fighting social media on issues that did not happen at school, that came to school, that impeded the learning environment. And so I would say Kik and Ask.fm, you get on, it's kind of like Facebook, you post something, you can post anything about anyone. It can be simple, it can be very rude, and there's no way for them to run past interference for each other. There's no way to defend yourself. Even if you say that didn't happen, you don't know who's posting it. And there's no way for you to know when you walk in school the next day who posted it until the whole grade level turns upside down. So I would say Ask.fm, I would not advise having that at all. Kik is a group texting app. It has been linked to a murder of a 13-year-old back east by a 19-year-old Virginia Tech student on a full ride for track. It is the #1 app that predators use to find young girls and boys. Again, it goes back to the non-privacy settings that kids aren't willing to put on, because on Kik, The more followers, the more hearts you get, the more likes, and the more attached you are to that feeling and that dopamine rush of feeling like you're loved. And so Kik allows predators to literally put in, age 14, Tempe, Arizona, give me all the girls. And if the girls or boys have not put in that their account is private, they are available. It will show their account. They can message them as though they're 16-year-old boys, 14-year-old boys and girls, and they have access to them. And so if you don't teach yourselves and your kids how to privatize their accounts, they are open game, and it is going on every day, all day long, in every school, every community in America. So Kik is not one of my favorites. I would not allow Kik. I have 4 daughters, no way. Lastly, Yik Yak is very similar to Twitter. It's newer on the scene. 5-mile radius, you yak. And so you do like a 2-line tweet, yak, and other kids can see who's within a 5-mile radius. Again, an anonymous platform where kids can say whatever they want about that kid that's at their school or 5 miles down the road. In college, it can be used for good because you can kind of meet up with people that have similar interests, but that's after that brain is a little more mature and can handle that. So I know I said a lot in that. I would highly advise, if you want a great website, SafeSmartSocial.com has this exact setup of all of the apps. It goes through every single app. It tells you the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's called SafeSmartSocial.com. I can't emphasize enough that you need to get on there with your student, if possible, and just go through and have them tell you why they like these apps. I know why they like the anonymous stuff. It's sometimes a release for them to get some of those icky feelings out. But on the other end of it, as school officials, when it comes to school and the damage is done, it obviously can impact their scholarships, their college careers. We've had several students in the community, unfortunately, that have learned that the hard way. Next in your folder is the Family Data Plan Contract. And again, if I leave you with nothing tonight, a group of us wrote a book, 4 years ago. Stephanie and I were part of it, as well as Frank Griffiths, who's a former cybercrimes detective. He's filming us tonight. This is a family data contract that Detective Griffiths put together, and it's simply a 12-step plan for your family. This language can be tweaked to your own devices for your own family, your own values, your own principles, but I highly advise you, if you are going to put boundaries in place, have your child have a voice in it. Part of our platform is dignity and creating social justice champions. We want kids to be able to move in and out of social groups with ease, with respect and dignity for each other, and to be technologically and media literate. And part of that is you being media literate and technologically savvy too. So it's a big job, and this is just an example and a baseline of a data contract that you can use and create with your student. Then there's no aha moment. The consequences are going to come. They're going to make those mistakes under your roof. You need to welcome the mistakes. The shaming approaches and the taking the phones away and the grounding, those consequences are your family's right, but this contract will go much farther with them in gaining social competence for themselves, trust in you as parents, and open communication. What we're missing in our communities and families is allowing kids to have that open communication. This is their life. This is their new normal, and we have to step into it. And some of us are a little bit behind the curve in even knowing what an app is. And so I say to you, my champion cause for you is, if you're going to give your child a device that costs between $500 and $600, and you're going to allow them to sync apps that don't sync onto your phone, and you don't have a supervision and management plan in place, then you can't expect an 11 through 18-year-old with an underdeveloped brain to understand the consequences that you're imposing. They have to be part of your plan. Lastly, I would say on the social competence piece, part of your own PTSD from middle and high school, sometimes walks in the door. And you hear the dun-nut, dun-nut, dun-nut when the phone rings and a teacher or an assistant principal or someone in the neighborhood's like, hey, my kid showed me something your kid was doing. You need to check that at the door, and you need to recognize this is their piece of meandering this social circle. And in order to be able to get through this social circle, which is pretty messy, pretty ugly, pretty harmful, and again, I go back to that past interference. There is no way that these kids can run past interference for themselves without the maturity and the developing brain behind them. And so you actually are their frontal lobe. You are their support and their boundary when this stuff goes down. So as part of this contract, the hope is if they have a voice in it, when, not if, the mistakes happen, the consequences won't be an aha moment. It'll be, yeah, I screwed up and it's okay. My parents are here for me, my school is here for me, and we're gonna get through this together. Because on the other side of 22, 23, and the other side of 30, supposedly, you're gonna have a social justice champion. You're gonna have an adult that you're launching into the big world that has this down. And so I close with the family data contract. Please talk to your kids about what they think is reasonable. Allow them to have a voice in that, and familiarize yourself with these apps. I could give this presentation in 6 months. That sheet will be completely different. 6 months ago, it had different apps on it. Now we have new ones. There will continue to be new ones. And teenagers are the largest consumers, obviously. And so knowing that and having a contract in place and allowing your kid to have some dignity and a voice in your family will take you a long way. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and I'm going to turn it over to Catherine.